What if every level of a billion-dollar startup was actually a trap dressed up as an opportunity? From intern to founder, this is the unfiltered truth about what each level really costs you: your time, your relationships, and your sanity. If nobody has ever told you this before, hit subscribe because we will. Every year, over 300,000 people join startups as interns or junior employees across the United States alone, dreaming of stock options, fast promotions, and the chance to say they were there before it was big. But here is the brutal truth that nobody posts on LinkedIn. According to a study by Cruise Consulting, nearly 65% of startup interns are handed responsibilities that would take a mid-level employee at a large company 3 to 5 years to reach, not because the startup believes in them, but because there simply is no one else to do it. And a report from the National Association of Colleges and Employers found that only 37% of startup interns receive any structured mentorship, meaning most of them are essentially learning by crashing, fixing the crash, and crashing again. Which sounds exciting until you realize that 1 in 4 junior startup employees burns out within their first 18 months, long before their equity even begins to vest. And while big companies like Google or Goldman pay interns a comfortable $8,000 to $10,000 per month, the average startup intern earns closer to $2,200, trading real money today for a small percentage of a company that statistically has a 90% chance of never making them rich. When you join a startup as one of the first 50 employees, your job title means almost nothing, because a survey by Gallup found that early startup employees perform an average of 84% more tasks outside their official job description than employees at established companies, meaning the person hired as a marketing coordinator is also managing customer support emails, sitting in on product meetings, and writing the company's social media captions at midnight on a Sunday. And according to LinkedIn's Workforce Report, early employees at startups work an average of 52 hours per week compared to the standard 40. But here is the part that actually stings. A study by Failery analyzing over 250 startups found that companies which scale past 100 employees retain only about 30% of their original early team, meaning the very people who built the foundation from nothing are quietly replaced by experienced executives, brought in to manage the growth they helped create, and while the promise of equity keeps most early employees loyal through the chaos. Research from JP Morgan's private markets team shows that less than 15% of startup employees who receive equity grants ever see a meaningful financial return. By the time a startup promotes someone to manager, the company is usually on fire in at least 3 different directions at once. And according to a report by First Round Capital, analyzing over 300 high-growth startups, nearly 72% of first-time startup managers were promoted not because they were trained to lead people, but simply because they had survived long enough to know where everything was kept. Which sounds like a compliment until you realize that the Society for Human Resource Management found that bad managers cost companies an average of $15,000 per employee per year in lost productivity, quiet quitting, and turnover. And startup managers carry that weight without the safety net that managers at big corporations have. Because there is no HR playbook, no leadership training budget, and no one above you who has time to coach you through it. And yet, research from McKinsey shows that startups with strong middle management systems scale 3 times faster than those without them, meaning the manager who successfully turns chaos into process is quietly the most valuable person in the entire building. So tell us in the comments, have you ever worked under a manager who either saved the team or destroyed it? And what was the one thing that made the difference? Becoming an executive at a billion-dollar startup sounds like the finish line, but according to a study by Spencer Stewart, the average tenure of a chief marketing officer at a high-growth tech startup is just 26 months, making it one of the shortest-lived senior roles in any industry. And that is not because these people are incompetent. It is because scaling a company from a few million to hundreds of millions in revenue requires a completely different set of skills than the ones that got you into the room in the first place. And research from Harvard Business School found that 60% of startup executives hired during rapid growth phases are replaced within 2 years as the company evolves past what they were originally hired to handle. And while the compensation looks extraordinary on the surface, A Carter report analyzing startup equity outcomes found that even C suite executives walk away with zero liquidity in nearly 40% of startup exits because the company either sells below its last valuation or the liquidation preferences of investors eat through the payout before it ever reaches the executive team. Most people look at a startup founder and see success, confidence, and control. But a study by Dr. Michael Freeman at the University of California found that 72% of startup founders self reported mental health concerns, and 49% said they were dealing with some form of depression, numbers that are nearly double the rate found in the general working population. And what makes this even harder to process is that these are the same people standing on stages at conferences talking about disruption and vision while privately managing a reality that includes missing payroll by 48 hours, navigating co-founder disputes that feel like a divorce, and answering to a board of investors whose loyalty disappears the moment the growth curve flattens. And according to a report by Startup Genome, 65% of startups fail specifically because of tension and conflict within the founding team rather than because of a bad product or a weak market, meaning the billion-dollar idea is rarely what kills the company. The human pressure behind it is. So drop a comment below and tell us, if you had to carry the pressure of building something from zero, what is the one thing you think would break you first? Every level of a billion-dollar startup promises you something different: equity, title, freedom, impact. But as you just saw, what it actually delivers is a version of yourself you barely recognize by the time you get there. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, share it with someone still deciding whether to join that rocket ship, and subscribe. Because the truth, nobody is posting on LinkedIn lives here.